In the last section, we spoke about how we're going to use Docker Compose to automate some of the commands that we were previously writing our long form using Docker CLI. The big purpose of Docker Compose is not only to automate some of these long-winded commands, it's also to make sure that we have the ability to easily start up multiple Docker containers at the same time and connect them together in some automated fashion. Now, to make use of Docker Compose, we're essentially going to take the same commands that we were running before, like docker build and docker run, but we're going to kind of encode these commands into a very special file in our project directory called docker-compose.yaml. Now, to be really clear, we're not just going to copy paste these into the file. We're going to write out these commands more or less in a special syntax inside the YAML file. Once we create that file, we'll then feed it into the Docker Compose CLI, and it will be up to the CLI to parse that file and create all the different containers with the correct configuration that we specified. Now, the Docker Compose file can sometimes be a little bit complicated, so I'm going to give you a quick preview of what we're going to do inside of it. So here's essentially what we're going to write into that file. We're going to first start off by saying, hey, Docker Compose, we've got a couple containers that we want you to create. In total, there are going to be two separate containers. One container is going to be called Redis-server, and we want you to create that container by using the Redis image, which can be pulled down from Docker Hub. We want you to also create a second image, or excuse me, a second container called node-app, and we want that container to be created using the Docker file in the current directory. Remember, that's the Docker file that you and I just put together 2 seconds ago, this one right here. In addition, after making that container, we want you to map some ports from the container to our local machine so that we can access everything running inside of it. So that's just a quick little preview because, again, some of the syntax that's going to go in here is going to sometimes look just a little bit crazy. Let's now flip back over to our code editor, and we're going to start writing out our Docker Compose file. Okay, so back over here, inside of my root project directory, I'm going to make a new file called docker-compose.yml. And then inside of here, we're going to write out all that configuration. The first thing we're going to do is add in one little required line, which is going to be version, a colon, and then inside of a set of single quotes, 3. That specifies the version of Docker Compose that we're trying to use with this formatted file that we're putting together right now. After that, we'll then put together this big block right here. So we're first going to head it off with kind of a big section header that says Docker Compose, here's what we want you to do. So to tell it, here's what we want you to do, we're going to write out services and then put a colon down. Now you're going to see the term services start to pop up a lot in the Docker world, especially as you start working with Docker Compose. Anytime you see the word service, it's essentially saying a container. Now, to be precise, it's not quite saying like exactly a container. It's kind of saying like a type of container. So in this case, by putting down Redis server and node app, we are saying that we are defining two services inside this Docker Compose file, and both these services take the form of these two different Docker containers. Now, the first service that we are going to create is going to be one that we're going to call Redis-server. I'll then put down a colon after that. And then inside of here, we're going to specify the image that we want Docker Compose to use to create this service or this container. So I'm going to say use the image Redis to create this service or create this container. So what you see right here is essentially accomplishing the same purpose as these 3 blocks right here. It's saying we want you to create a set of containers. This one is going to be called Redis server, and we want you to create it using the Redis image. So now we'll do something very similar for our other type of container that we're going to build. So notice I have indented a little bit right here, and we're going to create the node app service. So I'll say node-app. We want this container to be built using the Docker file inside the current directory. So rather than just specifying an image like we did right there, I'm going to say build : dot. And that means look in the current directory for a Docker file and use that to build this image that's going to be used for this container. And then after that, we're going to specify all the different ports that we want to have be opened up on this container. Now to specify the ports, we're going to put a dash, ports, like so, and then indented, we're going to put a dash like so. Now the reason we're putting a dash right here is dash in a YAML file is how we specify an array. So we can technically map many different ports inside of a single Docker Compose file for a single service or a single container. But in our case, we only want to map one set of ports. So we're going to connect 8081 on our local machine to 8081 inside the container. Now remember the syntax here. The first number is the port on your local machine. The second is the port inside the container. So if we want to stick to the same convention that we used previously, we could do 4001 like so. You know what, let's just stick with 4001 just to keep the distinction between these two numbers a little bit more clear. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Now let's take a quick pause right here. We're going to come back to the next section. We're going to talk a little bit about how we make use of this Docker Compose file to actually bring up these two containers. So quick break, and I'll see you in just a minute.